A Reverence for Trees, an emotional short read about love, healing, and magic, written by Lorna Tedder. Published by Lightning Seed Publishing, LLC, originally published in Words of the Witches from Berkley Books. Also published as Edge of Forever, a love story, narrated by 11 Labs. Part 1. Beltane. We sat very still in the grass and naked. We had made love for the last time, and both of us knew it. I kissed Sam's broad shoulder, then laid my head against it as I stared out at the pastel hues of sunset. I tried to memorize everything about the moment, the smell of the spring grass, the darkening shadows under the double oak on the hill, the distant chirp of crickets, and Sam. Most of all, I wanted to remember Sam the way he was this night, the way he would never be again. He slid his arm around me, pulled me close, and then kissed my forehead. His hair was a little too long on top, and the fringe tickled my nose. I should cut it, I thought. I should wait until he's asleep tonight and snip a few of those beautiful blonde locks. Something to remember him by. My hand fell to my belly, automatically, protectively. Goddess willing, I would have something else to remember him by. Goddess willing, because after tonight, there would be no chances of children. Not for Sam, not for us. "What are you thinking?" I asked, snuggling against him. Damn it. The question was a matter of habit. Just a sweet nothing I whispered whenever we cuddled. I hadn't even considered the question or the possible answers I didn't want to hear. He was most likely thinking about the 10 years we'd lost, about what a fool I'd been, about the dismal survival rate for newly diagnosed leukemia patients, even with aggressive treatment. I didn't want to hear his answer, not when I had to be the strong one. How could I be strong if I burst into tears every 5 minutes? "I was thinking about that old oak tree," he said. Probably a lie to spare my feelings. Sam was always like that. He pointed at the oak on the hill. It had grown from 2 acorns and entwined into one tree. It must be 100 years old. Not many trees last that long. Or people, I thought. Too many trees are cut down for parking lots and so-called progress, he continued. No one plants oaks anymore. "We did," I reminded him. He nodded and glanced up at the grassy ridge where we'd planted acorns as part of our Imbolc ritual, just the two of us, barefoot and wrapped in our ritual robes of black velvet, laughing and freezing our butts off as we celebrated the first signs of spring. Little had we known. I pressed my cheek against his shoulder and hugged him. Not a fierce embrace as it would have been a few months ago. No, gentle, as if he would break. We had made love in much the same way this evening as the light had faded from the sky. Soft, somber, sacred. No more wild tumbling or rough kisses. Instead, our bodies had taken on the subdued yearnings of 2 weary people who would not have this again and needed to feel the subtlest tenderness in every touch. Tomorrow would begin the hell of tests, the chemotherapy, the radiation, possibly a bone marrow transplant. The memories of tonight would have to last the rest of our lives. I shifted my cheek from his shoulder and blinked back stinging tears. I wouldn't have him feel their wetness on his skin and know I'd been weak. He was trembling. I drew back, then quickly covered my surprise with a polite cough. It wasn't desire that shook my Sam, but rather exhaustion. That's how it had all begun. Fatigue, a lingering flu, a cut that wouldn't heal, more fatigue. Sam was a big man in his prime, and for all the times I had quivered in his strong arms, now he shook in mine. "Sam." The lump in my throat swelled, and I couldn't form words around it. I swallowed, but still could not talk. "Don't," he whispered. I tilted my head enough to gaze up at his pale face, but he stared off determinedly at some imaginary spot in the distance, to some place where I could not follow. "We should go inside," I finally managed. "You're tired." He ignored me and nodded toward that damned tree again. "Beth, I never told you. That oak is why I bought this land. A semi had jackknifed on the interstate, and I took a detour on this little country road. There he was out there, majestic and alone." A frown plowed across Sam's forehead. I wondered how many other oaks had once shaded that hill. The rest were gone. Lightning, winds, people. That oak called to me. He was the last of his kind. I knew that if I owned this land, then one day you and I would plant more oaks. We'd fill these fields with trees. We'd return this land to the groves that once stood here. I raked in a sob. But you bought this land 7 years ago. I know. Sam, we weren't even together then. I backhanded the tears. We weren't together because I had left Sam over a stupid argument and married someone else. A giant mistake, all right. But one I'd realized too late. I'd spent the next 8 years trying to make a miserable marriage work, and then another 2 years of aimless wandering before getting drunk enough on margaritas to call Sam and see if he remembered me. All that time, lost. Time I could have been with Sam. You're right, Sam said. We weren't together then, but I knew one day we would be. How? I prayed that the god and goddess would give me one more chance with you in this lifetime, when the time was right, and that we wouldn't waste it this time. All I had to do was wait. His eyes met mine for an instant, then looked away to spare me. I was willing to wait the rest of my life, if that's what it took. I flung one hand over my face and looked away to keep my tears from betraying me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't talk. Beth, please, don't cry, please. Promise you won't cry over me. Don't ask me that, I sputtered. Don't ask me to make a promise we both know I can't keep. He held me then, rocked me back and forth as I sucked in the tears. I was supposed to be strong. I had to be strong. I sniffled and then straightened beside him. I've been so selfish, I said quietly, when a long while had passed. The first stars of night glittered above us as they had for lovers who had lived thousands of years before us. The lovers were long since cold, but the stars still burned. Sam, when we worked magic tonight, my intentions were selfish. I wanted to make a baby with you, to make up for all the time lost, to be here with me when you're, I choked, gone. Tonight's magic was so strong. Our ritual should have been for your healing. I made you misspend your energies. He shook his head. I've told you before, Beth. Healing is not meant for me, but I'm sure our magic worked. He smiled in that secret way of his. Sam's spells always worked. Won't you even try? I wailed. You're the most powerful witch I know, but you won't do anything to heal yourself. The two of us together are so powerful. Sam, I just don't understand. Was he punishing me? Did he know how much I deserved not to have him after I'd thrown him away all those years ago? And then I hated myself for yelling at him and hated myself for feeling resentful. Beth, it's not that I don't love you. It's not that I want to die and leave you. But in my heart, in my soul, I know what has to be. Don't. I've asked for healing and I've received my answer. But Beth, if you'd like, you have my permission to perform a healing ritual on my behalf. I stared up at him, gratitude welling inside me, and nodded furiously. Magic can change the course of a life, and working magic on other people would be unethical without their permission. At last, Sam had given me a chance to save him. Thank you, Sam. I kissed his cheek and nose and chin. Thank you. Tears still streamed down my face, but I was nearly giddy now. Sam rose wearily and stumbled, still naked, down the hill toward the house we'd finished building last autumn just before we married. I watched him fade away into the night. I will always love you, Beth, he said softly. The spring breezes caught his words and carried them back to me. I rose and ran all the way up the hill. In my head, I composed my ritual, the most important spell I would ever cast. My unsure feet fell on clumps of tall grass and in night shadows, but I didn't stop running until I stood before the mighty tree. This oak had been Sam's covenant with the god and goddess that he and I would be together again. I wanted this tree to bear witness to my magic, because if intent and intensity had anything to do with spell working, then Sam would be in remission and maybe even cured by Lammas, and his non-pagan doctors would be congratulating themselves on saving him. This would be a spell unlike any other spell. I didn't consult my astrological tables or select my mail-ordered athames or exquisitely carved wands from our altar. I had my chance at last to save my husband. It was just me, the power inside me to connect with the goddess, and my heartfelt wish to cure Sam. With no tools but my own hand, I cast my circle there in the grass with the oak, crickets, and stars as witnesses. Electric blue light shimmered around me as I raised my arms to the sky. Even before I called the quarters, I felt the life force of Mother Earth surge up through the roots of my feet. The energy of all the heavens entered my fingertips and tingled down into my arms and torso. I became a conduit between the earth and sky, an exchange of energy and magic and power. I sensed the presence of deity as I hailed the watchtowers of the four corners and asked the guardians to bear witness to the rite. I welcomed the goddess into my circle. Warmth jolted through me, an otherworldly current, and humbled me. The words of my chant tumbled off my tongue, my voice rising with each syllable. And in this place and in this hour, I call upon the ancient power to give to one who has a reverence for trees a gift of... Stop. I heard it clearly. A woman's voice, but in my head. I knew better than to dismiss it as wind. Do not ask for healing. What? Panic rose in my chest. I was in the presence of the goddess. I knew it without a doubt. Asking for healing was what I was here for. Asking for healing was everything I was here for. Nothing else. My pulse thrashed in my ears. What was I supposed to do now? Do not ask for his healing. Ask instead for strength. Strength? For what? For Sam? Strength to take him through the torture of chemo and radiation? Strength to fight and win? Or strength for me? To deal with his dying? You must be strong. You must be his strength to see him through. I understood then, or thought I did. Magic is seldom an overnight miracle. It can take days or weeks or even months. If Sam was to survive this ordeal, then I would have to be there for him in every way, to make up for lost time. And for Sam, I would send him all my strength, straight from my soul. I swallowed hard, then altered my words to do as the goddess had bid. And in this place and in this hour, I call upon the ancient power to give me strength to lend, and give him strength to mend. I give it willingly from my body and heart, to atone for that which has kept us apart. As I will it, so mote it be. No sooner had I thanked the goddess and dismissed the quarters than a heaviness overcame me, and I collapsed in the dew-laden grass. Part 2. La Masse. You look like death warmed over. I jerked my head up and peered between my fingers at the entrance to the intensive care waiting room I now called home. Oh, goddess, it was terrific to hear a friendly voice. Anna! I leapt to my feet and threw my arms around my high priestess. She was a couple of dress sizes bigger than I was, maybe a 14, and solidly into her 40s. She'd been my surrogate mother since before Sam and I had been accepted into her coven. She gave me a quick hug, then held on when she realized I wasn't ready to let go. I sobbed into her shoulder. Goddess knew I couldn't cry in front of Sam. I'm so sorry I didn't come sooner, she murmured into my ear. But I just found out this morning when I couldn't get you on the phone. I called Sam's sister. Beth, why didn't you tell me things had turned sour with Sam? I hung on to her for dear life. My knees gave way under me. I needed Anna's strength to stand. I was alone in the waiting room for now, and so glad to have her company. I guess I lost track of time. I'm sorry I won't be able to attend tonight's ritual. Shh, don't be silly. You have your priorities straight. She guided me back to the torturous chair where I'd slept the past 3 nights, amid the nervous chatter of other patients' relatives and the fumes of chemicals the night janitors used to wash the floors. Anna frowned and sniffed the air. When did all this happen? She asked. Oh, no. I twisted away from her, suddenly embarrassed and afraid I'd offended her. I'm sorry, Anna. I haven't had a change of clothes since Tuesday morning. Oh, hun, you're worn out. I'll stay with Sam while you go home and get a shower if that's what you want. Why don't you get a nap too while you're at it? No, no. Even before I answered, I was shaking my head furiously. I don't dare leave, not even to go to the cafeteria. What if the doctors have news? Beth! Anna took my hands and steadied me. Are you telling me you haven't been eating? I ran one hand across my forehead. My hair felt greasy, dirty under my touch. I'm not very hungry. Beth, look at me. Anna forced my chin up. Still, I refused to meet her gaze. Beth, you're 3 months pregnant. You've got to eat. Come down to the cafeteria with me now and tell me all about Sam. I can't. I dared not leave. I'd waited for 4 days for news. They had to give him a second bone marrow transplant. He didn't want it. I inhaled and blew it out raggedly before I spoke again. He did it for me. He wants to know that this pregnancy's safe and I'm not going to miscarry before he dies. I blew my nose on the tissue Anna handed me. I don't know what he thinks he can do about it if I miscarry. The doctors say even if he goes back into remission, there's virtually no chance he'll ever father another child. Anna scooted onto the seat beside me and drew my head against her shoulder. I wish I'd known. Last we talked, he was doing so well. And I'd thought for certain my spell had helped. Maybe it had. Until 4 days ago, we'd thought he had at least a 20% chance of surviving. He started feeling weak again, I explained. I knew it before he ever said anything. Your intuition. No. A long silence passed between us. I made some kind of connection with him. I could feel it. I was so tired. Hun, that's the baby. On the inside, your body's climbing mountains. You may not feel pregnant yet, but you're exhausted because of all that unseen work going on inside you. I kept my head on her shoulder. She smelled of sandalwood. I understand all that. This is different, Anna. I took him to the doctors. He was dying. I could feel it. What do you mean you could feel it? Anna asked carefully. The tone of her voice frightened me. I could feel the life draining out of my arms and legs. I was so incredibly tired. After the transplant, it got better, stronger. But the doctors still haven't told me anything. I just keep waiting and waiting for them to tell me something, anything. Beth, I don't mean to pry, but something's not right here. You're not an empath. You shouldn't be feeling everything Sam is, but you've made some kind of connection with him. I nodded against her shoulder. I know. I meant to. The goddess told me to be his strength, so I've been sending my strength to him and taking his pain where I could. You what? Anna framed my face with her hands and studied my eyes. I saw her wince. You connected directly to a dying man? Oh, hun, you've got to stop this. You should never connect directly with a terminally ill man. Ever. But it's helped, I protested. The doctors have been so surprised at how strong he's come through chemo and radiation. I don't doubt it, but what you're doing is a risk to you, Beth, and to your baby. I pulled away from her. She knew how much Sam meant to me. How could she question me? I have to do this, Anna. If it means he'll beat this thing, I'll give him the last ounce of my strength. And you will if you don't choose a smarter way. Hun, why didn't you call me? You don't have to be alone. Why do you keep cutting off everyone? Why are you punishing yourself like this? There's a safer way. Then tell me! My head pounded. I just wanted to sleep. A battery. A what? My arms hurt. My eyes hurt. I ached all over. I thought I was going to throw up or fall down. I was so tired, so ready to give up. A battery. Instead of sending your energy directly to Sam, send it into an object. Then he draws energy from the object. You need something natural and solid. Say, a crystal or a meteorite. Or a chunk of petrified wood. My eyes widened, and for the first time in days, I felt a flutter of hope. For his birthday, I gave Sam a petrified stump. I found it on our honeymoon while we were wading through a creek in the mountains. It weighs about 30 pounds, and it's too heavy. You need something lighter you can haul into the hospital with you. Something you can leave at his bedside. My hopes fell again. The intensive care unit had little use for personal objects. Sam was in there, without me, without anything he owned or held dear. Dressed in hospital gowns, his Celtic wedding band removed, he was as naked to the life we had as he'd been on the day he was born. A 30-pound rock would end up in a dumpster, I was sure. I'll find something, I told Anna. Then I'll break the connection. Good. Break it before it breaks you. I stared past her and let out a long sigh at the flourish of white in the hospital corridor. There goes Sam's doctor. Again. I sat up straight and dabbed my eyes with the soggy, wadded tissue. I know it's bad news. Dr. Minter keeps avoiding me. He hasn't come to see me in days, and every time I try to chase him down the halls, he disappears into a restricted area. Anna was up and out the waiting room door before I could drop the tissue in my lap and stand. A few seconds later, she stalked back into the room, triumphant, leading a stammering Dr. Minter by the sleeve of the white lab coat with his name embroidered in blue script above the heart. Dr. Minter, this is Beth Fisher. She'd like an update on her husband, Sam Fisher. I believe he's still a patient of yours? The doctor extended a jittery hand, then seemed to recognize me. Yes. Hello again, Mrs. Fisher. He glanced at Anna and recognized true authority when he saw it. I don't really have anything concrete to report. How about something in Jell-O? Anna snapped. This poor woman is pregnant, sleeping in straight chairs and won't leave to shower, let alone grab a bite to eat because she's scared she might miss the 5 minutes that you finally bother to tell her how Sam is doing. She wants to hear something from you. Anything, firm or not. Or would you rather she suffer a miscarriage right here in the waiting room? Oh. His jaw worked as embarrassment spread over his cheeks. I didn't want to report anything until it was firm. I don't like to get the family's hopes up. Doctor, her husband has leukemia. The only thing she has is hope. Something's happened? I caught my breath and waited. The doc just didn't want to have to deliver bad news. He wasn't comfortable talking to worried wives. That's why he'd been avoiding me. He thought no news was good news. He's better, isn't it? I could feel it. Yes. Oh, thank you. I wiped away fresh tears. Can I see him? Not yet. If he's holding steady on my morning rounds, you can see him for a few minutes then. He turned to leave, but Anna pulled him back by the sleeve. But there's nothing she can do tonight, right? She should go home and rest, right, Doctor? I can't leave Sam. If something should happen... I'm not sure if Anna squeezed the doctor's wrist or what, but he flinched, then regained his composure. Your husband is better, Mrs. Fisher, but there's no way you will see him before tomorrow morning. I'll expect to see you back here at 7 a.m., and you'd better be well rested or Sam's going to worry about you, and that's not good for him right now. Understand? I nodded. I knew I wouldn't sleep well, even in the bed I'd shared with Sam for the past year. But thanks to my won't-take-no for an answer high priestess, I'd been given a reprieve for a bath and a hot meal, and to find a battery for Sam. I made it home from the medical center in just under an hour. The house seemed unusually quiet, expectant when I walked inside. I could feel Sam all around me, an electric tension in the rooms. I took a hot shower and changed into my ritual robe, hair still wet at my shoulders. Barefoot, I walked into the backyard and stared up the hill to our favorite meadow and the giant oak tree. The sun was low in the sky, just as it had been that Beltane evening when Sam and I had made love in the grass. Crickets hummed in the distance, but everything felt one step removed from reality, as if I were walking there in an astral projection dream. My arms and legs ached. It was so still here and peaceful, and so far removed from that sterile waiting room. I trudged up the hill toward Sam's favorite oak. Baby oaks dotted the hillside, some 8 to 10 inches tall already, and marked in circles that kept out the grass. My hand fell to my stomach, to the other seed Sam and I had planted. Reaching the crest of the hill, I panted for breath. A jagged stripe marred the tree. I could see it from a distance. No! I ran the rest of the way. No, goddess, no! I reached the tree and nearly fell to my knees. By willpower alone, I tottered a few more steps and slumped against the trunk. I stretched my arms as far around the tree as they would go and leaned my cheek against its rough and torn bark where a bolt of lightning had cut a deep swath to the ground. I didn't even remember a storm. Then I spotted a limb no larger than my wrist and tall enough to pass as a staff. The lightning had splintered it from the tree and stripped the bark down to the beautiful, gnarled sheen of oak. For someone with a reverence of trees, I knew I had found a battery. Part 3. Sow in. Through the waiting room window, I stared out at the flutter of fallen leaves in the hospital courtyard. The light autumn breezes plastered the leaves against a stone fence with an engraving I couldn't read from this angle. This time last year, Sam and I had moved into our new house and decorated the front lawn with pumpkins in hopes of our first trick-or-treaters. This year, our best-loved Sabbath was to be spent inside hospital walls with perky employees dressed as green-faced hags and red-horned devils. Even Dr. Minter, who knelt before me, wore silly clown hair. "How much?" I asked, careful to keep the tone of my voice even. I'd come to know the doc quite well since that day Anna had commandeered him, but I couldn't help frowning at that damned wig. Dr. Minter sighed and jerked off the rainbow hair. 5%. That's all? The test showed only 5% cancer cells in his marrow this time? That's good, isn't it? The doc cursed, twisted the wig in his hands, and then slammed it into a nearby trash can. "Mrs. Fisher, Beth, it's such a small percentage, but it means—" I finished the sentence for him. "It means he's not going to make it. Okay, so what's next? Another bone marrow transplant? We'll do it. More chemo? Whatever it takes." The doc shook his head. "No, Beth, not again. He's just not strong enough. He's tired of hurting." I knew what Dr. Minter was thinking. Sam had already left his body once. I'd been warned he was dying, and I'd thought I'd be okay with it. I'd stood watching at the bedside with a team of hospital personnel. Instead, the instant the doc said Sam was gone, I started screaming, begging for him to bring Sam back. I hadn't cared how much pain life held for Sam. I had just wanted him back. I couldn't bear the thought of being without him. Dr. Minter had resuscitated my Sam, and after that we'd gone for transplant number 3, followed by more chemo. Sam had been in constant pain since then, most moments clinging to the oak staff I'd imbued with my own strength and love. "Can't we do something?" I pleaded. Dr. Minter shifted on his knees in front of me and let me get a good look at the defeat in his eyes. "He's ready." I slumped in the chair and wrapped my arms around my belly. At 6 months, my pregnancy had become obvious to everyone. "How long?" I whispered. "Is Sam going to see his baby?" The doc shrugged. "I don't know. He could. It's possible he could hang on for another 3 or 4 months, or more likely that he could go tonight." "Tonight!" I sucked in my breath. I might have only one more night with Sam. And because I'd been so immature and made a stupid mistake all those years ago, I'd missed 10 years with Sam. Over 3,000 nights I could have held him in my arms. Lost. "Beth, are you still with me?" The doc touched my shoulder and waited for me to nod. "I've instructed the ICU staff that they're to let you sit with him whenever you like. We're going to give him something for pain. He'll be out of it after that, but I thought you might want to talk with him first." Dr. Minter walked me down the corridor. Someone, probably a well-meaning volunteer, had taped cutouts of ghosts and scarecrows to the painted block walls. A cutout, "Happy Halloween," hung from the ceiling with little green witches dangling on cardboard brooms. I fought down the nausea and smashed my hand against the 2 wedding bands that hung from a chain around my neck. My heart pounded in my throat. We stopped at a pair of huge steel doors. Dr. Minter punched a 5-digit code into a panel on the wall, and the doors swung slowly open. "Third curtain on the right," he said, and I walked forward, leaving the doctor behind. I counted the curtained rooms, one by one. I was vaguely aware that my feet moved onward while I seemed to float somewhere behind. Numb, I stopped outside a half-open curtain and just stood there, staring at the hospital bed and all the machinery on either side. A nurse in blue scrubs nodded at me and motioned me inside. "Stay as long as you'd like," he said, and then headed for a set of monitors at the main desk. I stood at the foot of Sam's bed and refused to recognize the man on the sheets. My outer eyes saw the bony weight loss, the stubble of hair, the pale skin. My inner eyes saw the curve of muscles on his arm, the sexy flash of a smile, the wild mane of hair. I looked down at the frailty of a tired soldier and remembered the first night we'd made love after we'd found each other again. How his passion had erased all those years. I saw his battle scars and thought, instead of the nights under the stars and the ethereal radiance in his eyes when he was deep inside me. "Sit with me," he whispered. His soft words startled me. Suddenly I was moving, finding a tall metal stool, pulling it close to his bedside. He lifted his right hand, wrapped in tape and tubing, and let it drop. I knew what he wanted. I gathered his hand carefully in mine and brought it to my pregnant belly. He splayed his fingers to feel the roundness. Then he smiled. Remember the acorns we planted? I desperately had to say something, anything, to fill the silence. They're getting big now. So are you, he whispered. I paused. I brought you something from your oak. I fished in my pocket for 3 acorns and slipped them into his other palm. His hand closed around them. I wouldn't tell him that lightning had struck the oak or that half of it had dropped its leaves. The other half thrived, its branches loaded with acorns, and our coven would help me plant every seed we could pick with the exception of the 3 acorns Sam now held. Beth, I've seen it, he said softly. The Summerlands. They look just like our hill. Wild flowers, green grass, lots of oaks, and it doesn't hurt anymore. We lost you not long ago, I reminded him, but you came back. I saw them then. I wasn't afraid. I'm not afraid now. I see them again. I gasped. Oh, Sam. He'd never make it to see the baby born. I bit my lip and looked skyward. One of his nurses had taped a Polaroid of my last ultrasound to the ceiling above him. You were just dreaming. Looking out the window. He shook his head slightly. I can't see out the windows from here, can't see the trees in the courtyard. I don't even know what time of day it is. It's early afternoon, the last day of October. Samhain. Yes. Maybe that's why the veil is so thin now. I raked in a sob. I wouldn't let him see me cry. I wouldn't let him see me cry. This time last year, we'd spent the day cooking a Samhain stew representing every animal and plant we'd eaten in the previous year. A little chicken, a little fish, a little potato, a little corn, a little of everything to honor the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new one. Beth, you have to let me go. I gritted my teeth, shook my head. Can't. Beth, it's time. I want you to take my staff. He inclined his head to the safety rail at his left side. The oak staff, his battery, pressed against the silver bars. It still seemed to buzz with energy. I'll recharge it for you, right now. No, there's only so many times you can recharge it. I want you to destroy it. I stared at him. Sam had never allowed a tree on his property to be cut down, no matter what. He even recycled limbs and sticks into trellises for the garden or saved them for Sabbat and Esbat bonfires. Even the ashes from the fireplace went back into the flower beds. But destroy the staff I'd made for him? I want you to take it outside. I want you to close your eyes and break it in half. Be sure you close your eyes, Beth. When the power leaves the staff, it could blind you. I nodded, but with no intention of carrying out his ridiculous request. As long as he had his battery, he could hang on. As long as he could hang on, there was hope. Leaning forward, I placed my cheek near his shoulder, but I was careful not to let my weight rest there. Aren't you going to ask me what I'm thinking? He whispered. Abruptly, I sat up. Since Beltane, I had not once asked what he was thinking. I was too nervous to ask. I guess he'd noticed. I was thinking about how lucky I am. Not many people get the chance to say a long goodbye. People who die suddenly never get to say those last I love yous. Just like Sam, finding the good in this hell he'd endured. I was thinking, too, he said, about a ritual I did alone. It was a few nights after we first heard the diagnosis. You did one alone? I didn't know. Since our marriage, our rituals had always been either with the coven or together. The only exceptions were the ones I'd done since he'd given me permission to perform magic on his behalf. What was your ritual for? I asked. Healing. I sighed. Then it was still possible. Sam was so powerful, so powerful. With an illness as dangerous as leukemia, healing might take a long time. Then Sam smiled weakly. Healing for you. What? I pressed his hand hard against my belly, against the little oak growing inside me. Sam, what are you talking about? I don't need healing. In the past 6 months, I've been in and out of hospitals, and I've seen more sick people than I ever thought possible. But you, Beth, you need healing more than any of them. I'm fine. What was he talking about? Here he lay at death's door and he was worried about me? No, you're not fine. You see, that night when I asked for healing, I already knew that my purpose in this life had been served, except for this. He wet his cracked lips. I got a strong message not to ask for my own healing, but to ask for yours. But you're the one with leukemia. I'm fine. My voice echoed in the small chamber, and I purposely lowered my pitch. I'm fine, Sam. Really, I just want you to be well again. I want things to be like they were. Like they were last year, or like they were the first time. You have to forgive yourself, Beth. I looked away and focused on a nearby IV pole, but my vision blurred. I don't understand. Yes, you do. You keep blaming yourself for all the time we lost. Don't. His words ripped at me. He'd meant them to be gentle, comforting, but instead they tore through me. I was so stupid, I mumbled. God, I can't believe I was so stupid. You're not the same person now. He lifted his hand to wipe a tear from my cheek. Without the past, you wouldn't be the woman I love now. I caught his hand and held it. I never meant it, you know. I was 19, just beginning to study the craft. I loved you so much. I wanted to marry you. I wanted children with you. He barely nodded. And I wasn't ready. It wasn't you. It was me, Beth. I was so crazy about you, but I had to know if it was you or the religion that spoke to me. I needed a little time to make sure. I closed my eyes against the memory, and I took it personally. I didn't want to wait. 3 lousy months was all it took for him to work out his spiritual path and show up at my door with an engagement ring and a proposal. By then, I'd been married to Bobby for 2 months. So I married someone else to teach you a lesson. I shook my head. I'd been miserable. Bobby had married me partly to convert me, and for the next 8 years we clashed on a daily basis until he finally gave up and filed for divorce from his least favorite witch. By then, Sam had vanished from my life. We were all taught a lesson. You see, we're all part of this architecture of situations that move us toward wholeness. Everyone who participates in the lesson gets to learn something, even if it's brutal. We both learned things that made us better people in the long run. He held his breath, swallowed the pain, and exhaled. If you hadn't left me and married someone else, we would never have had this past year together. No, we would have had 10 more years. I wasted them because of my immaturity. They weren't wasted, my love. They weren't. Think back to the 2 people we were when you were 19 and I was 23. We were novices in more ways than one. We didn't value each other then. You partied too much. I spent a little too much time getting high or drunk. We weren't mature enough to realize how much we could hurt each other or anyone else. I know. You're right. We also had no idea how much either of us would hurt inside because of a split-second decision. We were wiser now. Yes. Bitterly so. Imagine if I had married you then, Sam whispered. His breaths came harder. As immature as we were, we would have ruined everything. I would have been drunk all the time or high. You would have felt neglected and probably cheated on me all the time. I didn't move. I wouldn't acknowledge it, but I knew Sam was right. His neglect was how I had ended up with Bobby. Beth, it took your leaving to make me straighten up my life. I gave up my vices and completely turned my life around. I don't think that would have happened if your leaving hadn't shaken my world to the core. He was right, and I never really appreciated Sam until after I'd thrown him away. I had learned the value of our relationship the hard way. So you see, my love? Sam's fingers tightened around mine. If we'd had those 10 years together that you think we wasted, we might never have had the love of our lives this past year. We would have been 2 other people, probably long since divorced and hating each other. I kissed the back of his hand, between the tubes and tape, and then held it to my cheek. I didn't care anymore if he felt my hot tears on his skin. They were honest tears. How can I let you go? How, when I've finally found you? Because given a choice of 10 years of who cares or the past year of the greatest love I could imagine, I will enter the Summerlands rejoicing because I had more joy with you than any man deserves in a single lifetime. And when you're an old woman and you've watched our child grow to manhood and his children after him, then, my love, I'll be waiting for you in the Summerlands. I love you, Sam, so much, and I will always love you. He squeezed my hand with all his strength. But you've got to let go of the past, Beth. You've got to let me go. He closed his eyes then. I didn't realize it, but his nurse had been standing behind me just outside the curtain. The man in scrubs padded silently into the room, withdrew a syringe from a canister of medical equipment, and emptied the syringe into the IV in Sam's arm. I watched, though I couldn't tell where the liquid had mixed with the other fluids, and followed it in my imagination to his skin, to his bloodstream, to his heart. The frowns and ridges of pained muscles seemed to smooth in Sam's face, and I knew he didn't hurt as much now. He'll sleep, the nurse said softly in my ear. But he can still hear you and sense that you're here. If you'd like to talk to him, say your goodbyes. It won't be any better than it is now. I nodded and flattened Sam's palm against our baby. Then I sang, song after soft song. Every folk song he loved. From Bonnie Portmore to The Trees They Do Grow High. I wanted my voice to be the last thing he heard. Yet he held on still. Even when I was hoarse. I knew then that he would never leave as long as I was in the room with him. Not after the last time when I'd fallen to my knees, begging Dr. Minter to bring him back. Sam wouldn't do that to me again. He wouldn't make me watch him die. As tired as he would hang on for as long as I stayed by his side. I knew then what I had to do. I arranged his hands on his chest, both over the heart chakra, the acorns tucked safely in one palm. With a little effort, I wheeled the bed toward the west so the setting sun would linger on his face. I bent and kissed his forehead, then his dry lips. Holding my breath, I lifted the oak staff from his bed. The nurses in ICU moved aside as I walked down the corridor, the long stick clutched in my hands and tears streaming down my cheeks. Employees in the hallways, dressed in silly costumes and handing out candy to people in the waiting rooms, backed up against the walls. No one tried to stop me. No one spoke to me. Not even Dr. Minter, who stood in a doorway watching with tears in his eyes. I took the stairs down to the courtyard. Somewhere along the way, I kicked off my shoes. I stepped barefoot into the cool grass in the late afternoon, out to the fallen leaves, out to the stone fence with the engraving I never could read. Not heaven itself upon the past has power. But what has been, and I have had my hour. John Dryden. I stopped in front of the stone and with two hands gripped the raised staff above my head. I felt its energy course through me from head to bare toes. I felt my baby move. I closed my eyes. Then with all the strength I had, I brought the staff down hard, splintering it into two on the stone. A great whoosh of energy knocked me to the ground. I felt the gates of the Summerlands open and close. I will always love you, Beth. The wind caught the words and sang them through the courtyard. I opened my eyes. Everything had quieted. I dropped the remnant of the staff and wrapped my arms around my belly. Sam's spells always worked, always. The end. To learn more about the author's work and books about real magic in the real world, visit lornatedderbooks.com.